So yesterday we were talking with Desiree McGraw. She's a Liberal MNA in her particular riding in NDG. And of course, if you just kind of move to Côte-des-Neiges, that has basically been the epicenter for attacks on Jewish institutions. We had a school, synagogue, a couple of schools actually, that have been hit with either bullet holes. One apparently was trying to set a fire there. There's a community basically on edge right now, right? Anxious, fearful. So we wanted to find out more because, look, this is a big story. Jennifer Maccarone is Liberal MP for Westmount St. Louis. She's also the opposition critic for the fight against racism and public security as well. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. So I'm going to start. First of all, Jennifer, thank you for making yourself available. We appreciate that. Let's talk about public security. There are a lot of people very, very nervous now. We want to know what's going on. What can you tell us as far as what the government has done? And I will ask you by extension, and I'm not so sure this is necessarily something you can, in fact, give us an answer on, but we've been wondering where Montreal's police chief is. Fadi Daguerre's been away, and apparently he's away till the end of the month, and there's been basically radio silence from the police, even though a lot of people are very, very concerned.
Well, and thank you for having me. You're right. It's a very important topic of conversation, and I'd like to congratulate you for constantly bringing awareness to the cause and making sure that we have constructive dialogue and discussions about it, which is not an easy thing to do. Public security, with reason, is, of course, top of mind, and as it should be. I have had the privilege of having conversations with the ministers involved, so with François Bonnardel as well as with Christopher Skeet, to see what they're doing on their end. Understandably, there's a lot of information that they're unable to share because we want to let the police do the work that they need to do. But I have been reassured in the briefings that I've received to date that they are working very closely with the SPVM. They're also working very closely with the SQ in terms of investigating what's happened at our two schools, as well as initiatives that have been taken when we're talking about hate speech and all of the protests that have been going on. And I don't want to intervene in those investigations because they're important, but I have been reassured that work is happening and that it's progressing and that they are pleased with the progress that's taken to date. As far as Fadi's absence, I can't speak to that. Fadi doesn't report to me, so I don't know where he is. That's a good question for Madame Plante.
So I'm going to add to the things that we've been dealing with is that now the attacks of Jewish-run businesses, and again, just adding to this sense of insecurity and out-and-out fear. We know that the second in charge, the deputy director, deputy chief, I suppose, Vincent Richer, has been declining interviews as well. So at what point, Madame Maccarone, do we insist? I mean, we have to have some guidance from these leaders. We have to give a sense of safety and security. Why are we not hearing from them? And can we demand that someone be speaking on this?
You're right. It's a strange situation that we find ourselves in, and with all the respect that I have for Madame Plante, it is odd that we do not have a spokesperson from the SPVM that's addressing the public, especially during a time when there's an increased feeling of fear. In my riding, in particular in Westmount St. Louis, which is all the downtown core, the protests begin in front of my office. They end in my riding, often in front of the Consul General of Israel, in a residential area. So citizens are deeply, deeply concerned. I've been working with the mayor of Westmount to bring awareness, to address the concerns of citizens. You're right. I can't answer the question as to why they have not gone in a public platform to explain what they've been doing other than the increased police presence across the ridings that have been specifically implicated, whether it's because they have synagogues or whether because actions have been taken. Is it because there's a concern that we don't want to, there's a fine line, right, between interventions and when do you act and what do you do and causing a riot. Montreal does not have a good history when we're talking about riots that have happened in the past, whether we're talking about the Carré Rouge or any other things that have happened. And I'm sure that that's a fear or a concern that they're addressing when any decisions that they've been taking.
You see, that's interesting because you're right. We don't necessarily have much of a track record as far as that's concerned. But then again, we're dealing with, I think now, something potentially much more dangerous, inflammatory. And yet still, and I understand, as you're explaining it, Jennifer, the idea that, we don't want to say the wrong thing, but we're saying nothing. And that in and of itself would seem to be an issue. That's the wrong thing, I think, to do right now. Most people are starting to feel that way.
But Madame Plante has come out, right? So she's come out and she's made some very solid statements, in my opinion, where she's been very clear that anti-Semitism, violence, hate speech is unacceptable, and those things do need to be investigated, and they should be, because if it's a criminal act, then it's a criminal act that should be investigated. And I appreciate the fact that she's done that. Now, is she the person that's dictating who's coming out and who's speaking? I don't know. Again, those are good questions for her. I hope you invite her to the show
we have.
so that she has an opportunity to express herself. But I can't speak to the inner workings of what's happening municipally. The SPVM, maybe they have said that they do wish to speak, or maybe it's part of a concerted effort and part of their plan to lay as low as possible while they're doing their investigation. So I'm a firm believer in information is power, and I do think that it's important to address, speak transparently, clearly, say what's going on, because, it's an information society. Our population is far from ignorant. We have access to information, and we want to make sure that people are speaking. The people that should be speaking are the ones that have the right information, so that we're demystifying what's going on, and people have access to facts. And that can only happen if the people that are in power that have the information express themselves.
Right. So, yes, the mayor has been denouncing the acts of anti-Semitism. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. She has very clearly. But now there are calls for the resignation of the anti-racism commissioner, Bashar Manai, whom she appointed. And we haven't heard anything on this. I'm wondering, since this is part of your role as well, the critic for the fight against racism, do you believe it is time for Bashar Manai to resign?
It's it's also an excellent question. I have only met Bashra once, and that was when she was originally announced. And I think in the beginning, people had a lot of expectations that she was going to be accomplishing good things in her role. Now, the reason that she hasn't come out to speak and express herself or say what her action plan is, whether it's regarding anti-Semitism or Islamophobia for that matter, because we know that there's more and more of these crimes and things that we're addressing in society. In a Montreal that I do not recognize, by the way, this does not feel like home.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and should we be calling for her resignation? I think that she needs to be given an opportunity to express herself and say what and if and anything that she has done or is planning on doing before we go that route. There might be a reason behind it. And in the event that there's cause behind the fact that there has been no action taken, then I think that, again, the leadership for the municipality needs to have a long, hard look at who's in the positions of power and what they're doing.
I will say we're running out of time. I just want to simply point out one thing. Everyone at the beginning of this, if we can say the beginning was a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned Valérie Plante having made a political stance or taken a stance in terms of saying this is not acceptable in Montreal. We know the premier came out. You named other ministers who basically said the same thing. I worry, though, that was then and this is now. And now this seems to be fading from view in terms of people standing up and saying every day, as more and more acts are committed here against the Jewish community, saying nothing. In other words, we said something 2 weeks ago and we haven't changed our position, so we don't really feel a need to say anything again. And that to me is very, very worrisome.
You're right. It's a good point, and I think that's why it's important that the media keeps bringing awareness and attention to it. And I think that we all need to speak up and denounce all the acts. I don't think you can rely on all of your politicians to do it. I think that the citizens need to speak up and say that this is not acceptable, and do it on every single platform. In terms of what can we do beyond making sure that we are investigating and persecuting criminal acts, and I hope that that's something that the police and the SPVM are currently doing, as well as the Sûreté Québec. But I also think that we need to, as a society, denounce it and say that we will not tolerate this anymore. It's a small minority of people that are perpetrating these actions, but boy, oh boy, it's the after effect. It's taking over, and it's taking up too much space. And what you were saying in terms of what's happening, the attacks on Jewish businesses, it's having an impact on the economy. It's having an impact on restaurants that are impacted by the protests, that can't have people come in, that they have to cancel their reservations. It's destruction of property. It's the fear that people have now to speak up and speak out, because if I say something on social media, what's going to happen? Am I going to be the next target? We've reached a point where we tolerate hate, and it needs to stop. But we need to do that in a dignified and in a respectful manner so that we can have an actual conversation and debate. And it's okay to disagree, but it is not okay to have your hate speech take people out and make people afraid to speak up.
Whew.
Well said.
Yeah.
Jennifer Maccarone, Liberal MP for Westmount St. Louis. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.